welcome along to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Steve McKnight.
And I'm Andrew Nicol.
And tell the show, we're talking about the 4 strategies you could use to make your retirement fund last longer. And I know this is a property podcast, but it's also a podcast about how to be better with money and also how to make the money you make from property actually last for a bit longer so you can have a really good life. And I recently saw a really good report from, would you believe it, the New Zealand Society of Actuaries.
Yeah, those guys would have had a ripper of a Christmas party, wouldn't they?
Well, it was a good lot of fun, this report, actually, and they've got 4 rules of thumb that you could use in order to make that retirement fund last a bit longer. I thought they were really good, so I want to share them with you. But, Andrew, for anybody who doesn't know, what is an actuary? What do they actually do?
Well, no one else knows apart from you, Ed, because it's you and the team of the nerds.
Do you know, I actually Googled this. There's about 463 actuaries, so I am among friends. But these guys are running numbers, looking at data to try and predict the future. So, you know, they're kind of in the same realm as statisticians and economists where they're running numbers, but they do it in I would argue, a much more methodical way, or using different techniques, I should say, compared to economists or to statisticians.
Yeah, and they're often used in insurance companies. So insurance companies, when they're assessing the likelihood of you dying at age 67 and them having to make a payment out, they use actuaries.
Cool, so let's get into it. What is strategy number 1 that people can use?
So strategy number 1 is called the rule of 6%. So the way this works is you're going to always take out the same amount of money. So not inflation adjusted, just the same amount every single year. So if you start off with a superannuation balance of $100,000 when you get to retirement, you're going to take out $6,000, and then next year you're going to take out $6,000, and in year 3 you're going to take out $6,000, and then year 4 you're going to take out just saying how long.
What happens in year 5?
$6,000.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a good strategy if you want to front load your retirement, because, you know, when you're 65, you might want to travel a bit more. When you're 85, you're probably traveling a little bit less. So arguably this works better if you want to have more money at the start.
That's right. And you might say, okay, well, that's only going to last me, say, 16 years, for instance, because that's 100K divided by $6,000 every single year. But you've got to remember that if you've got a KiwiSaver balance of 100K, you get to retirement, you're probably still going to invest that money. It may still earn a return if you put it in, say, a balanced fund. So your superannuation may last longer depending on the return you get. And the really, really cool thing that this report shows is how long it potentially lasts. So for you guys watching on YouTube, you can see this. For anybody listening to the podcast, I'll obviously explain it. So in 95% of circumstances, so even if your returns from your KiwiSaver after you hit retirement are really low, you can still expect that retirement fund to last to about 81, 82 years old. So even if the markets don't do very well, you are very, very likely to be able to take out that $6,000 every single year for about 16, almost 17 years. Okay, what if the markets do a bit better than that? Well, in 50% of circumstances, you can actually keep doing that out to about 94 years old. So, you know, you've got a 50-50 chance to be able to go out to 94 years and still be able to do that. Now, if the markets do absolutely well, maybe you can last out to 100. That could happen, but isn't as likely. But you've got that 50-50 chance lasting to 94. So that surprised me how long it actually can last, even if you use that balanced KiwiSaver fund or use a balanced fund after you hit retirement. It can last a wee bit longer than you might think.
Ed, why is the amount of $6,000 going down? Is that because of inflation on here?
That's right. So when you look at the graph, and you guys listening to the podcast, you can see this if you go to our YouTube channel. If you take out $6,000 this year, you can buy $6,000 worth of stuff. Now, next year, prices might have gone up. So, yep, you've got $6,000, but because the price of everything has gone up, you can't buy as much with it. So in real terms, in inflation-adjusted terms, over time, that income will go down over time. Now, again, as Andrew said, you might be okay with that because you want to front load your spending in retirement. And you expect that, you know, maybe once you hit 94, maybe you're not traveling as much as you were when you were 65 because you might have some mobility issues. You know, you might not be as mobile.
Probably not.
So what are the kind of pros and cons of this? Well, first of all, one of the best benefits of the rule of 6% is it's so simple. You know, you retire with 200K, you can take out 12K a year. Every single year, no matter what. If you retire with a higher amount of money, it's just such a simple rule, 6%. And you've also got that known regular income. You don't have to think about inflation. You know you're not going to be able to spend as much in real terms. You're not going to be able to buy as much as the prices go up. But you know what it's going to be every single year. And most people, they don't think as much about inflation. So knowing 6K a year, hey, that's pretty simple. The cons of this, obviously, though, is that your income does go down over time in real terms. So as you get older, you're not going to be able to buy as much stuff. And because you are front-loading that superannuation, there is a bit of a risk that you're going to run out of money compared to some of the other strategies that we'll take you through in a moment. So it really does depend, though, on how well the markets do. So there's a bit more risk in this strategy. What's strategy number 2, Andrew?
Strategy number 2 is the rule of 4%. So this is where if you've got $100,000 in your KiwiSaver, you're going to start by taking out 4%. So that's $4,000 per year. And then you're going to increase that every year by inflation. So, of course, the benefit is you've got the same purchasing power with your withdrawal every year. The downside is you're not going to start out with as much money because now we've got the $4,000 coming out, so we're a third less money that we're able to spend every year, but we're going to preserve our wealth for a longer period of time.
Yeah, because we're not taking out as much money at the start, your money does end up lasting longer. And so that is really good for people who are worried about running out of money. Or if you think you're going to live to 110, this could be a really good strategy for you because you're going to think, holy heck, I need to make sure my money lasts. And if we look at those probabilities again, you've got that 95% chance. So it is almost certain that your money would last to 86. Now compare that to the rule of 6%. You had a 95% chance that your money was going to last to 81. Under the 4% rule, you're very likely to hit 86. So you've got an extra 5 years at least if you take that 4% rule. So living to 86, yep, that's pretty cool. And you have got a 50-50 chance that your money would actually run to, believe this, 103 years old. A 50-50 chance to last 103.
It's a long time.
Now, most people don't live to 103. It is highly unlikely that you will live to 103. And so if you follow that 4% rule, hey, pretty good chance that you're going to have a good amount of money right through your 90s. And so that can be a really good rule if you are worried about that.
And interestingly enough, because we use a 4% net return on the golden goose strategy, anyone that got to retirement and said, actually, you know what, I don't want to bother investing in property, they could use this rule and have these same numbers.
Pretty much. It does depend a little bit on how long, on what the returns of the market are, but you've got a pretty good chance of lasting to over 100. And even if we just think about it, so you've got that good chance that instead of running out of money at 81, you're now going to run out at 86. Even if you think the market does a bit better, you've got a 50-50 chance of lasting to 103 with this strategy rather than 94 with the rule of 6%. So you get an extra 9 years with the rule of 4%. So I think that's where it can be really beneficial for people. I know there are a lot of numbers we're throwing in here, percentages, but this is really just trying to quantify risk and put it into probabilities. And so what we can say is the rule of 4%, highly likely that you will have money for longer. You just don't start out with as much. What is strategy number 3, Andrew?
This is called the fixed date rule. So you run your investment fund down to a set date. So say, for example, you're retiring at 65 and you say, I expect I'm going to live till 90. Now that's 25 years in retirement. So again, if you've got 100K, you take out 1/25th of the money, which is $4,000, and you do the same next year, i.e. next year you say, right, I've got 24 years left, I'm going to take out 1/24th out, and so on and so on.
And what are the pros and cons of that strategy?
So I think the biggest pro is you actually have a definitive date that you've worked out that you're going to use your money up over. So you've got that locked in, you've got control of that.
Yeah, the other strategies we've talked about have an indefinite date. We're saying, well, it could end at, say, 83 or it could end at 96. This one, you're going to choose that end date, but your income is going to be more variable over that time.
Yeah, which is the only negative, right? You're going to have a fluctuating amount of income every year.
And the other thing is you've actually got to recalculate this every single year, because you say, okay, I've got 10 years left and my money's got to run out when I'm 90. I'm now 80 years old. I'm going to take out a tenth of what's left. And the amount you actually get depends on, well, how well has the market gone over the last year. And so if you guys watching on YouTube, that means that you've got a 95% chance, so you're almost certain to pretty much spend exactly the same amount every year, around that 4,000 mark. But the amount you get to spend actually may go up every year. You've got a 50-50 chance that the amount you can spend goes up every year because the market has done reasonably well. If the markets have an absolute bull run, you might find that you can really start to ramp up your spending as you get on. But I quite like this one again because these are quite simple rules of thumb. You either take out the same amount, 6% every single year of your original fund, or you inflation adjust it at 4%, or you say, oh, great, I'm going to live for 25 years and I'm going to take a 25th out and then a 24th out of what's left and then a 23rd out. Just really, really simple. And there is one other final rule that they talk about, which is the life expectancy rule. What is strategy number 4?
So this is kind of similar to the fixed date rule, but you take out the value of your KiwiSaver divided by the average remaining years for your life expectancy.
Now, this sounds similar, but it's actually the most complicated to figure out, because effectively what happens is that your life expectancy increases over time. And I'll tell you the reason why. Let's say you're 80 years old, right? And Stats NZ might say, okay, the average 80-year-old, given that you've made it to 80, you're probably going to live to 90, right? But then what happens is, over the next year, everybody who was going to die at 80 dies. So they're now gone. Now, the average life expectancy has increased because you've now made an extra year. Then, after another year,
Martha's dead as well.
Yeah, all the people who were going to die at 81, they're all now gone. And so the average gets pushed up because all those people are now out of the cohort, are all out of the mix.
This is way too complicated.
Well, that's where this one I'd say is probably has the most cons because it is more difficult to calculate. You'd want to talk to a financial advisor. So under this, your income could stay roughly the same, but will decrease once you start getting to those really high levels of age. Because, and again, this is quite complex, right? But if you start at, say, 65, you might expect to live to 90 years old. But if you live to 100 years old, there's a decent chance you're going to live to 101 or 102. But it's very unlikely if you're currently 80 years old. God, it is actually quite complicated now once you start explaining it. Maybe don't use this strategy. Maybe this isn't the best rule of thumb unless you're really keen on the detail. But what ends up happening is you've got a really high chance of being able to spend, right out to 100 years old, even at smaller amounts, because this is all about saying, hey, look, I'm probably not going to live to 100, so let's front load a bit of that spending, but also let's make sure that I've got some money left over in the kitty once if I do end up lasting to 100 years old. But it ends up being, pretty minuscule. Maybe don't use this one. It's quite complex.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, of the ones we've talked about, which one would you lean towards for yourself?
I think I like the rule of 4% because the 4% gives you a consistent purchasing power because you're adjusting for inflation each year. I like that.
Yeah, I'd go for the rule of 4% as well. It's kind of similar to the one that we talk about with the golden goose or the nest egg strategy. It just means that you've got the same amount of purchasing power right throughout life. And I know in a couple of episodes, we're going to talk about how long are we going to live? So based on data, how long is Andrew going to live? How long am I going to live? What about our partners? And I always think is that if there's a bit of an age gap, if you know that one of you is more likely to live longer than the other in your relationship, if you're in one, it's really important to think about, well, what happens if I die and then my partner's there and they've got another, 5-10 years without me. Really important that they've got that consistent income as well. I also think this can be really useful. If you're nearing retirement, maybe it's not just your KiwiSaver, maybe you sell down some of your properties and then you've got all of this money and are thinking, what do I do with it? Well, one option, of course, is to buy high yielding properties and just live off the rental income, but you might also like to try out some of these. Or I know your mum's quite close to retirement. She's sold a property, has got a bit of income. Some of these are actually really simple. But if Marie didn't have a son who was a financial advisor, these are really simple for everybody to use. So, I can see a lot of examples where this would be useful. Right, let's wrap it up there, but please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Property Academy podcast. Really does help us get the message out to more people. And hey, if you're listening to this on the audio version, you might like to check out some of these graphs. Just Google Opus Partners YouTube. It'll be the first thing that comes up. Or if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps us. Thanks for listening to the Property Academy podcast. I'm your host, Steve McKnight. We're going to be back again tomorrow with even more daily strategies, tactics, and insights to help you get the most out of the New Zealand property market. Until next time.